Hello to my friends and welcome back to the community of independent thinkers. Let me be clear right from the start. If you open any mainstream newspaper today, you are being fed a pacifying bedtime story. They tell you that a United States KC-135 refueling aircraft crashing into the isolated Iraqi desert is just a weather-related mishap or an unfortunate mid-air collision. They label Washington's sudden decision to ease oil sanctions on Russia as a mere short-term technical maneuver to stabilize global energy markets. They describe the Israeli airstrikes pounding Tehran and Beirut as precise surgical blows aimed at restoring order. Stop deluding yourselves. Toss those mainstream media lies into the garbage where they belong. The naked truth is far more ruthless. What we are witnessing are not isolated accidents or minor policy missteps. We are looking straight into the calculated collapse of an arrogant empire. The United States is fleeing in strategic desperation and leaving behind a geopolitical ash heap. Look at the Persian Gulf. Iran is using fleets of smaller boats to lay mines in the Strait of Hormuz. Why are they doing this? The foreign policy establishment in Washington consistently portrays this behavior as the irrational madness of a hostile rogue regime. Naive. Profoundly naive. You need to understand that this is the cold, calculated survival logic of a state facing an existential security threat when you are backed into a corner by the overwhelming conventional military power of the United States and Israel. You do not line up your military for a frontal assault. You strangle the enemy's economic jugular. The Strait of Hormuz is the main artery of the global economy, carrying 20% of the world's oil supply. When Mojtaba Khamenei, Iran's new supreme leader, vows to keep blocking this vital waterway to avenge the blood of the martyrs, these are not just bitter, empty words. This is a highly calculated strategy of weaponized geography. The global economy is bleeding to death. Oil prices have surged to near $100 a barrel, making an absolute mockery of every pledge by the United States and other major economies to calm the markets by releasing emergency reserves. The United States might possess thousands of advanced fighter jets, but kinetic firepower cannot solve the inflation that is currently strangling the wallet of every single American voter. This leads us to the most tragicomical policy reversal of the century. Look at what the decision makers in Washington are doing right now. The administration has just temporarily lifted sanctions on Russian oil, allowing hundreds of millions of barrels of crude currently stranded at sea to be sold to buyers around the world. Top Senate Democrats are screaming in outrage, accusing the administration of strategic suicide and pointing out that Americans are paying record-high prices at the pump. But why is Washington forced to do this? Make no mistake, this is not a sudden change of heart or a burst of humanitarian goodwill. This is the brutal calculus of internal political survival. Leaders do not act based on the lofty moral values they preach from air-conditioned podiums. They act to save their own political seats at home. The liberal hawks and neoconservatives in Washington hubristically declared they would crush the Russian economy with crippling sanctions and crack down on Moscow's shadow fleet after 2022. They lied to themselves. Now, as the war in Iran sends energy prices skyrocketing, they are essentially getting on their knees and begging for supply from the very nation they labeled a mortal enemy. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent claims that this sanctions exemption, lasting until April 11th, will not provide significant financial benefit to the Russian government, arguing that Moscow derives its revenue mostly from extraction taxes. That is laughable. It is a blatant deception of the public. When you release 130 million barrels of oil trapped at sea, you are pumping financial blood directly into the Russian war machine. Edward Fishman, a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, rightly points out that in one fell swoop, Washington has undone a massive amount of pressure on Russia, and he worries this is effectively the total destruction of the oil sanctions. Europe is standing by. watching the United States tear up its commitments with utter bewilderment. A death warrant for American strategic credibility has just been signed in ink. If you look at the 30-year historical axis, you will see that this tragedy was programmed from the start. We have been infected with a disease of grandiosity. We actually thought we could socially engineer the entire Middle East to our liking. Look at the invasion of Iraq in 2003. We destroyed it. Look at what we did in Libya. We turned it into a burning slave market. Look at Syria. We threw that country into a bloody meat grinder. And now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stands at a press conference and says he is creating the optimal conditions for the overthrow of the Iranian regime from within. Here is the regime change delusion all over again. Do you seriously believe that a deeply entrenched state like Iran will simply collapse because bombs are dropped on Tehran, setting off air defense systems and hitting nuclear capability compounds? Not at all. Brutal foreign intervention always breeds extreme nationalism. When Israel bombs the center of Beirut, right near the Lebanese government's headquarters and the Lebanese university campus, killing senior academics like Dr. Hussein Badzi and Dr. Murtada Sroor, that is not a targeting error. Do not call it mere self-defense. Call it exactly what it is, a strategy to create a dysfunctional rump state. When you cannot completely control a territory, you destroy its core infrastructure. You create a wasteland where 800,000 displaced people in Lebanon, including 200,000 children, are left fighting for daily survival. Roughly 1 in 10 children in Lebanon has been displaced. Over 1,300 Iranian civilians have been killed. French President Emmanuel Macron complains on social media about the death of a French soldier in Erbil, Iraq, arguing the war in Iran cannot justify such attacks. Naive. When you deploy your military forces into a burning region as tools of intervention, you must accept the risk of them being burned. Lebanese Prime Minister Nawaf Salam desperately pleads that his country must not become an open arena for the wars of others. But the pleas of the weak carry absolutely no weight in this anarchic international system. As Thucydides taught us long ago, the strong do what they can, and the weak suffer what they must. Let us look closer at the ruthless material reality on the battlefield. The United States KC-135 crashing in the isolated desert of western Iraq is a prime, costly example. Central Command describes it as a mere incident in friendly airspace involving 2 aircraft. But you need to look deeper into this exhausted war machine. The KC-135s are the oldest airframes in the arsenal, yet they are the heavily used logistical backbone of the Air Force, responsible for refueling fighter jets and surveillance planes. The relentless abuse of these Cold War-era machines for non-stop campaigns strangles maintenance capabilities. The attrition is not just measured in the tragic loss of the 3 crew members currently the subject of a search and rescue effort. The attrition is the fact that Washington's forces are stretched to the breaking point. This is the 4th manned aircraft to go down since Operation Epic Fury began in late February, including the disastrous friendly fire incident where 3 Air Force F-15E Strike Eagles were shot down by Kuwaiti F-A-18s. This is the direct consequence of an arrogant military doctrine that tries to be everywhere at once, but lacks the capacity to control anything. And who is benefiting from this suicidal tragedy? Cast your eyes toward Beijing and Moscow. The other great powers are not blind. They are watching and taking meticulous notes on every single mistake Washington makes. President Vladimir Putin just ordered more than 13 metric tons of medicine to be airlifted to Azerbaijan and transported by land to Iranian civilians. That is not pure humanitarianism. That is a ruthless, brilliant geopolitical move. Russia is cementing its alliances while America is tying its own hands. And what about China? China is the only true peer competitor to the United States. A smart, realist America would have completely pivoted to Asia, cutting its losses in non-core regions. Instead, what are we doing? We are burying our strategic credibility and our national treasury in the sands of the Middle East. Beijing is smiling. They see a distracted American empire. While the United States is bogged down dealing with oil tankers ablaze in the Persian Gulf after attacks by the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, China is sharpening its industrial capacity and preparing for the real fight in its own backyard. What is happening right now are not fragmented pieces of news. It is an irreversible path dependence leading directly to strategic disaster. They talk about democratic values and a rules-based order in their air-conditioned boardrooms, while the material reality is dead bodies, displaced children, and empty munitions depots in the trenches. The United States has walked itself right into a structural trap, and now it is thrashing about inside it. Every attempt to flex its kinetic firepower only pulls the economic noose tighter around its own neck. The sheer naivete of the West is being punished by reality in the most ruthless manner imaginable. Stay safe, stay vigilant, and never stop questioning the narrative. The truth is still out there. I will see you next time.